video, we will be talking about PWC SDC interview rounds and questions for the role in statutory audit and assurance off campus. So I applied through an employee referral, and as expected, I received a mail from PWC asking me to complete my details on their workday job portal. A few days later, I got a pre-screening call from their recruitment team. During this call, I was asked about myself, my location preferences, and the domain I was interested in. Later that same day, I received an email with the job description and compensation details for the role of Chartered Accountant Fresher Associate 2. Following this, I was asked to complete few surveys and submit an updated resume, including a photo within the specified deadline. After completing the steps, I received an email 3-4 days later informing me that I have been selected for the interview. They also mentioned that I would be ineligible for the on-campus drive, which was indeed the case as I was rejected on campus due to this criterion. For the next 11 days, I didn't hear back from them despite my follow-up via emails and calls to the HR representative. On the 12th day, they informed me that I had been selected for a virtual interview, which was scheduled for 2 days later, along with the necessary interview guidelines. Now let's jump into the questions I was asked during the interview. Yes, so always start again, as I always mention in my video, start by greeting the interviewers first, or if they greet you first, thank them and ask them how they are doing. The interview was again divided into 3 rounds: introduction, technical, and a situational question answer session. So in the introduction round, there were 2 panelists who introduced themselves and they asked me to introduce myself. Moving on to the technical round, they started with the resume based questions like, can you brief us about the audit plan and how you carry out audit planning? Then they moved on to the other questions, other technical questions like explain materiality in detail. I also discussed benchmarks and gave examples to them in my answer, which the interviewers appreciated. Then they asked me, can you provide few examples of audit procedures while auditing fixed assets and depreciation? And in case if they are not very clear with your answer, they will again repeatedly ask you again on certain assertions or certain audit procedures to ask you they will ask you to explain them in detail. Then they asked me, how would you proceed with the audit of the entire year's depreciation expense in the profit and loss statement, and how do you check the reasonableness of the amount? It was a followed up question, and again a followed up question that do you have any audit procedures for the same or not? Then again a resume based question was thrown to me like, have you conducted walkthroughs? Describe a walkthrough of any significant account that you have done during your articleship. Then they asked if I was familiar with controls, and I honestly admitted that I wasn't very familiar with this concept and I haven't done it much practically. The interviewers were kind and understanding, and they proceeded as if I knew what controls meant. Then based on my answer about the revenue walkthrough that I answered previously, they asked about the type of controls that could be implemented to avoid errors and how those errors might occur. So I gave my best response, even though it was somewhat haphazard, but I covered several points on the same and they liked my answer. Then moving on to the final situational question and answer round. So they asked me a few questions over here like, tell me about a time when you had delegated tasks to your team members during your 3 years articleship experience, from working under supervisor to being a senior. How have your team worked? How you delegated them the work? And what were the consequences and challenges you faced from them? Can you share any constructive criticism you received during your articleship? How did you learn from it? And how have you progressed over time? So constructive criticism isn't strictly negative. It provides helpful feedback on how you can improve. Yes. Then they asked me what improvement points you gave to your juniors and then they ended like, what are my top 3 location preferences? Finally, they asked me if I have any questions for them. So my interview lasted around 25 to 30 minutes, and so these are a few questions that I could recall from my interview, and I hope this information is will be helpful for those who are preparing for their interviews. And always remember, any interview is very different in its content, so it's not like it's like these certain questions were asked in my interview, so it has to be asked in your interview. Interviewers are being very creative these days, right? So yes, do share this video with your friends who might be sitting for the interview, and don't forget to leave a comment if you found this information to be insightful. Wishing you all the best for your interview.